What's happening, everybody? MLB season. It is starting this week, and in this video, I want to give you a rundown of how to use the contest generator and the Sims tool to give you guys the best chance to win money playing MLB DFS this season. So do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're looking to sign up for any of the baseball packages that we have here at Stokastic.com, sign up using the link that we have down below in the YouTube description box. And if you're watching this early on in the season, we do have a promo going on to start the year, which is only $1. $1 to get access to any of the subscriptions on our site. That is going to cover you through April 3rd with packages renewing on April 4th. So no matter what day you sign up, you do get access for just $1 through April 3rd. So take advantage of that offer now. Even if you're watching this ahead of the season, sign up. Get yourself in the door, play around with the tools so you can familiarize yourself with them. And once again, in this video, we're going to go over how to use all of those tools. But if you want to sign up, link down below and enter that promo code cycle if it's at the start of the season so you get access for just $1. Now, where everything starts here, it is going to be in the contest generator, because within the contest generator, this is where we're going to build out our pool of lineups. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have the right sport selected. So make sure that it is baseball if you're building out baseball lineups. Then have the right site selected in addition to the league here. So if you're playing on DraftKings, you're going to be building DraftKings lineups. We support DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, and Owner's Box within our simulation tools. Now, we only support classic contests for baseball. We don't support the showdown contest. So it's going to be classic contest selected. We do support all of the turbo slates, the late night slates. So make sure you have the right slate selected as well that you're going to be playing. Now, as far as pool size goes, you want this to be most accurately to match the size of the contest that you're playing in. You can build up to 5,000 lineups in the contest generator. So if you're playing in a large field GPP, talking about something with, 5,000 plus entries, you select 5,000. But if you're playing something like single entry and maybe the field is only 500 or 1,000 people, then you select whatever it is that closest matches the contest that it is that you're playing in terms of total entries. And if you are on a core package, you can build up to 1,000 lineups. If you're on our max package, you build up to 5,000 lineups. That's the differentiator between those two packages. Now, team controls, if you want to, you can entirely remove a team from your pool. The use case for this is typically going to be if a game is rained out or there's some sort of real weather issues and you just want to really quickly remove it from your pool entirely. In general, though, you probably just want to go with our default settings here and don't want to play around with stuff too much. We have done a good amount of research to make sure these settings are going to build pools as accurately as possible for the size of the slate each day and what site you're playing on. So even stuff like the stack settings here, if you have your own research that indicates you think that certain stacks are going to be owned by the field more often than what we have in here, you could change them, but or else you probably want to be using our default settings. And after you have everything set, you want to press generate lineups. Now, what is actually happening here is we are building out a pool of lineups that is expected to match the field. The idea of this is not to build, at least not here, the lineups that you're actually playing or set exposure that you're actually playing. So in the stack type exposures, for instance, if you want to build 5-man stacks, you don't want to set that just to 5-man stacks. You still want it to be set to what the field is actually going to be playing, because that is what's going to give you the most accurate representation of the contest possible. And that's going to give you the best possible sim results when we simulate out the slate here just shortly. So once again, what's happening here is we are building lineups that are expected to match what the field is doing. And then once those lineups are done being built, you'll see this all up here on the screen. So the ownership, this is our projected ownership. The pool exposure, which should be pretty close to the ownership. The idea here is the pool exposure should match that ownership. You want it to be as close as possible to build yourself an accurate pool to simulate the slate. And then the difference here, it's just the difference between the pool exposure and the ownership. In general, it's going to be, like we said before, pretty close. Now, if you do want to change any of the ownerships here, what you're doing is you're changing essentially the projected ownership of the player. What you don't want to do is boost players up or down because you want more of them in your lineup. We're going to do that aspect in the Sims after we simulate out the slate. You don't do that in the contest generator. So what you would want to do here is, let's say we have Paul Skeens projected for 37% ownership here in our pool. If you think he's going to be maybe 50% owned, you could boost his ownership and then you regenerate the pool, and that is going to have him appear in more lineups. If you think he's going to be lesser owned, then you'd go and you would downgrade him. But once again, you only do that if you disagree with our ownership projection. You do not do that if you want to get more or less of a player in your lineups. We'll handle that in a little bit. after your contest pool is completely generated, next thing you're going to want to do is press simulate lineups. And this is going to take us to the lineup simulation page. And first things first here, we've got all of our player projections on screen. So if you guys want to use the default Stokastic projections, you could fire those up. They're all loaded in here and ready to go for you. If you do want to upload your own custom projections, you could do that very simply. All you have to do is have a CSV with one column that says player name, one column that says projection, a column that says ownership. You upload that, and then your data is going to be included as part of our simulations. Now, if you want, you don't have to have all of these columns. Like if you just want to have, say, projections, you could just have a player name and a projections column, and those would only be the two things that are changing. Now, if you want to just change the individual projections on an individual player, you could do that as well. Maybe you think Paul Skeens should be projected for 21 fantasy points. You could put him in for 21. If you ever want to roll it back, you could press this rewind arrow and it'll go back to our initial projection. You could also go to an individual player like Chris Sale here. You could change his owner or his fantasy point projection by 1 and give him 1 extra fantasy point for each plus arrow you press. And then the inverse if you press a negative arrow. If you want to downgrade his projection by 1 apiece, you could do that right here as well. Now, if you got all your projections ready to go, you could simulate the contest. Although one other thing you're going to want to check is make sure all these settings up top are correct. One thing that you could change here to make your lineups more unique and simulated for the contest you're actually playing in is by changing the percentage payout to first. We have added more different contest structures into our tools this year. So depending what contest you're playing in, to get the most accurate simulation results possible, you could select 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, or 40% to first. And the way you figure out percentage to first, it's simply whatever contest you're playing in, what percentage of the total prize pool goes to first place. So on DraftKings, for instance, opening day, the big contest, it is a $500,000 prize pool that pays out $100,000 to first place. $100,000, that is 20% of $500,000. And then you would select 20% to first. And then when you run the contest simulation, which we're going to be doing here in a second, it is going to simulate the contest with the pay structure that is associated with a 20% to first payout. And the reason this makes a difference is because, and I'll press run contest simulation here. That's the next thing you do after you have all of your settings correct and you've got your projections uploaded. The reason you want to have the correct percentage to first payout is because it does impact how well individual lineups perform. So for instance, if you're looking at a contest that pays out 5% to first, well, the payout's pretty flat there. And min cash versus first place, it's not as big of a gap as if you're playing in something like 40% to first place, where it's massively top heavy. And to build good lineups, you're probably going to have to build really high variance lineups, maybe be a little bit lower owned. And these are all things that are going to be taken into account in the simulations. So why you want to make sure that you have the percentage to first selected correctly. Now, what's actually happening here on the page is all of those lineups that we built out in the contest generator, they're all now being simulated against each other tens of thousands of times within the contest structure that we have selected here, 20% to first. So the idea being is that every time we simulate out the slate, which is on a play-by-play basis, we're going to find out at the end of each slate where each of those lineups rank, how much money that they made in each individual simulation run. So then when we are done simulating these contests and these games out tens of thousands of times, we're going to have these lineups ranked based on the expected ROI of those lineups from the simulations that we ran. So when this is done in a second, you'll see that we have a sim ROI metric, which is just going to be telling us which lineups were the most profitable in our simulation runs. And then when you favorite those, you have your lineups ranked for you based on how profitable each of them are expected to be, which is what we have right here. So the lineups that you're seeing over here, they're the ones that were built in the contest generator, simulated out, and now they're organized by the simulated ROI. So what you have here is the sim ROI. That's the catch-all. It's like the wins above replacement of DFS lineups. It is the most important metric that you're going to see here on the screen because it encapsulates all of the other data that we have here. So things like projected fantasy points, the ownership, how often it won, how often it finished in the top 10, how often it cashed. Those are all metrics that play a role in what the total sim ROI is. So I'm going to be selecting my lineups throughout the year based on which ones do have the best simulated ROI. Now, if you do want to make some sort of adjustments here, you could make different filters for your lineups. So if you look at stack types here, you'll see of our top lineups, these are the different stack types. But maybe you only want to play 5-man stacks. If you did want to do this, you could create a filter within the stacks, and then you just press these 3 dots right here, go to filter. And then if you wanted to, you could say stack type contains 5. And now this will only show your top lineups that are 5-man stacks. If you ever want to delete the filter you made, you just go right back in here and you go remove all, and it'll reset those filters. And you can do that in all different kinds of ways. So let's say maybe you only want to play lineups that have Paul Skeens. If you just want to find your Paul Skeens lineups, you go to the lineups, you could press in Skeens, type in Skeens, and now all of these lineups here, these are all of our top lineups that have Paul Skeens in them. And then you can remove any of these filters at any point in time you want. You could make multiple filters to have different ways to sort your lineups or figure out different lineups that you want. If you wanted to pick lineups with just a particular team, you can do that as well within the stacks. But what you do after all of these are selected is you'd go and you'd quick favorite however many lineups you're playing. If it's 20, 50, 100, or a custom amount, you could also go ahead and you could enter a custom amount. So maybe you're playing a very specific, like 28 lineups. Now it'll favorite your top 28 lineups by sim ROI. One other thing you could do as well is if you want to make your lineups a little bit more unique, you could go and use the unique setting and you could change it to 3, 4, 5, whatever the number is that you want. And what that is going to do is it's just going to diversify your lineups a little bit. So if you were to select 3 uniques, that's going to mean that each lineup that you are playing is going to have at least 3 different players in it compared to any previous lineups that have been selected. But for now, I'm not going to make any kind of real adjustments, not going to set any uniques. I'm not going to do any filters for now. I've shown you guys how those work. I just want to favorite the top lineups, and then we're going to go over to the exposures page. Now, on the exposures page, what you're going to see is, well, the players you have the most exposure to, or the players you have the least exposure to, depending what it is that you're looking at on the page. But to start here on the exposures tab, you'll see the salary of each player, the simulated player ROI. So this is across all the sims, these individual players, what their ROI was in those lineups, their projected fantasy points, their pool ownership, which is the equivalent of what their ownership is for us in the pools and in the contest. Then we've got the exposure. This is how often they are in your lineups. And then the leverage column, that is the difference between the pool exposure and the pool ownership and the actual exposure. So because we have 66% of Jose Ramirez in our top lineups, and he's projected for 17.8% ownership, 48.2% leverage, because we have that much more of him than what the field has. And you could sort this in different ways. If you want to go like this, you can see the players you're most underweight to. So you see that in this run of simulations, our top lineups, only 13% of them had Paul Skeens, where he's projected for 37% ownership. So we're underweight to the field on him. We're underweight to the field on Zach Wheeler. And then if you looked at the other side of this, you can see the players that are most overweight to the field too. Now, the next question is going to be, how do you customize it? This is pretty simple. So what you do from here is you go to the ROI boost, and let's use Paul Skeens as an example, because we had him in 13% of lineups. He was projected for 37% ownership. There's a good chance you looked at that and you said you wanted to have more of Paul Skeens. So if you type in Paul Skeens here and you give him an ROI boost, let's say 20%, and then you press boost ROI. Now, if you go back to the lineups page here, every single lineup that contains Paul Skeens has now been boosted by 20% ROI. What this does is if you unfavor your top lineups and now refavorite your top 150 lineups, we are going to land on more exposure to Paul Skeens because we've given him a boost across all the lineups that he's in. So remember before, we only had Paul Skeens in 13% of lineups, but now because we gave him that ROI boost, we now have 35% of Paul Skeens. So you can do this with as many players as you want, and that's the easiest and the most effective way to change your exposures to more fit who it is that you want to be playing. So use those ROI boosts. That is the way that you're going to want to get yourself more or less of a player. It works the other way as well. If you wanted to have less of Paul Skeens than initially showed up in the Sims, well, then instead of giving a positive ROI boost, you give them a negative ROI boost, and it'll do the same thing, but in the inverse. So now we go back, unfavored our top lineups, refavored the top 150, and now we should have less of Paul Skeens than we had to start with, which is the case. Paul Skeens now only in 1% of our top lineups. And then if at any point you want to clear any individual boost or all of the boost, just press clear boost and then boost ROI. And then if we go back here, all of the Paul Skeens lineups have now been reset. So if we go back to Paul Skeens, he's going to be back at the initial 13% that we had to begin with when we did all this. Now, If you want to do just a hard cap on players, like we have 66% of Jose Ramirez in our top lineups, and maybe you just aren't comfortable playing that much of Jose Ramirez, we could go into the exposure cap and you could instead say, I don't want to have any more than 40% of Jose Ramirez. You could press 40%, then set exposures and adjust favorites. And now all of your lineups will automatically be reselected for you. And you will now have a cap of 40% of Jose Ramirez. So you see here, he ended up being in 40% of lineups. So if you want to just put a hard cap on players, that's a way you could do it. If you want to set a hard cap on all players, you could also do a global max exposure. Maybe you want to have really spread out exposures on the slate. You don't want to have more than 30% of any one player. 30%, set exposures and adjust favorites. And then when you go back to the exposures tab, there is not a single player who is in more than 30% of lineups. If you ever want to cap a player or a whole group of players, that's an easy way to do it as well. And then the same way that we cleared out the boosts before, you do the exact same thing. You could clear out exposures. That could change back to 100%. And now we're back to our starting point here. So that's the easiest way that you could change the individual player exposures or cap individual player exposures. One other thing you could do as well within the ROI boost. Now, this is something that really only applies to MLB because stacking isn't really something that's prevalent, something like NBA. But you could also do boosts for individual teams. So let's say you want to get to more exposure to the Cleveland Guardians or less exposure. You do the same deal. Give a 10% ROI boost. And then if we were to boost the ROI, every single Cleveland Guardian stack would have a 10% ROI boost added to it. If you are uncomfortable with 48% of your lineups being Cleveland Guardian stacks, you do the same deal. Negative 10% boost. You'd press boost ROI. And then that would balance all the exposures that you have to the Cleveland Guardians. Now, if you also want to check your exposures to stacks on the whole, go right here, press this button, turn it on, and this will flip from your player exposures to your stack exposures. And what you'll see on this page is your stack exposures of all different stack types to each team. So if you want to see the teams you have the most three-man stack exposure to, you can sort by three-man stack exposure, and you can compare that to what percentage of the field is expected to play three-man stacks, as well as three-man stack leverage, four-man stacks, five-man stacks. You can sort this however you want to see how much exposure you have to each individual team and in what sort of stack type. So that's a good way to get overall information on the kind of stack exposures that you're getting. Now, after you're done with all of this and all of your top lineups are selected, so you're good with your individual player exposures, your stack exposures, you got the lineup selected you want, the next thing you could do is you use the entry manager, which is super, super easy. All you have to do is you go into DraftKings or FanDuel, wherever you're playing, download the CSV. You no longer have to copy and paste on our website and edit CSVs on your own. You could upload the CSV directly to our simulation tool, and then you favorite your top line. Once your lineups are top favorited, you could just fill them in right there on the entry manager. You export from here, and then you upload that directly to DraftKings FanDuel. No more copy and pasting in CSVs. We handle all of that for you now. It was a popular request, so we made sure to get that done so that some of the people who maybe aren't as proficient with Excel or don't know what they're doing, you don't have to worry about it anymore. We're taking care of all of it for you in the entry manager. The same way if you guys have ever used our late swap tool, either for NBA or for MLB, it's the same sort of deal where you just upload the CSV and then it will fill in all the lineups for you. You don't have to be bothered with the copy and pasting. Other than that, thank you guys very much for watching. If you have additional questions or comments, let me know down below in the YouTube description box. Also, any of the packages that we have at Stokastic do come with access to our Discord channel. So if you are signing up for a package, or if it's the start of the year and you're taking advantage of that $1 promo, which is going to be running through April 3rd, make sure you join Discord, because if you have questions, if you want to ask us questions on shows, you can hit us up in there. If you got questions for the devs about how any of the tools work, we have a lot of access within the Discord channel. It does come with every single package we have on the site. So be sure to join Discord. Other than that, enjoy the tools. Make sure to ask me any questions if you have any, and good luck this baseball season.